Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders, a safe space for women to thrive in community where their voices and stories are heard. We're a sisterhood supporting each other to live our dreams and embody the sacred feminine to restore balance on our planet. Join us each week as we return to the unconditional love and guidance of our heart and our womb. I'm your host, Meredith, and I invite you to walk this path of beauty, devotion, and service with us. Hi, Jane.
Hello. I'm just pouring my cup of tea here for our little call.
Yeah, it's such a joy to see you. For anyone listening to this, I'm here with my friend Jane, who has been on the podcast before, and I'll include her episode in the show notes. But we got to spend some time on the magical island of Kauai together. And she's still there now, and I'm in Colorado. And it's been a little while since we've seen each other and dropped in. So, yeah. Anything you want to start with, just what's alive in you right now?
Well, as I'm just witnessing you, I'm just present to the first time we had this call, when I was in Alabama and you were on Kauai, and then the magical way the land of Kauai connected us, and now to have you back on the mainland and me here feels really, I don't know, there's just something that feels really mirroring, holographic in a good way about it, and just also so present in this moment to the power of Kauai and what Kauai held, for you in this past period of time. So I just really feel her presence between us here.
Yeah. Yes. And Kauai really held like that, kind of like that whole year of preconception for me and for Michael. And it was like, I knew it, but I didn't know it. That feeling of just like the intuition of like, I think motherhood is coming soon. But there was such a journey with my partner and I, him being like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And then for me too, to really be in that readiness, it was like, gosh, to fully say yes and to make that choice. It's like knowing your whole life is going to change, and there's so much unknown, and there's so much that that could be challenging or go wrong, or just like it's such a vulnerable choice, I think, to make. And so Kauai held a lot of grandmother energy for me, and meeting Barbara, who was the leader of this doula training that I was in for 4 months, kind of like knowing, not knowing if motherhood would be right around the corner. And it was. And as our time in Kauai was coming to a close, Michael and I brought some offerings to Kalalea, the mountain that looks like a pregnant woman lying on her back. And some say that the souls enter and leave through that mountain. So the energy of birth and death is really strong on Kauai. It's a lot of wisdom held there. And we didn't actually conceive on Kauai, but it was, I think, about 6 weeks after we left that we conceived, and so it was pretty soon after. And now I am 6 weeks on the other side of giving birth. And I called Jane to be here to hear the birth story and to just kind of like have a relic of this time that I just went through, to have like something that I can come back to, or if I ever want to listen to, or to share with others. So I'll just see, what are you called to ask, just around where to begin?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that I'm present to, that I'll just speak into the space, is just this lineage of like storytelling, and how significant it actually is that we take the time to tell the stories, of what has unfolded in our lives and the stories of birth. And um, recently, in the past few years of my life, I every time it's my own birthday, I call my mom and I say, "Tell me the story. Please tell me the story of the day I was born." And it's been a really precious reconnection because it's like, I think mothers and the way that our culture does mothering and birth as a whole, it's kind of this like forgotten place. You know, there's this kind of place of numbing or pain or like dissociation from that portal, but it's so precious, and every single part of the story, you know, it's so precious. And as an adult woman who's been on a womb healing journey and a spiritual journey, I want to know every detail, you know. And so I'm so grateful, so happy for your beautiful daughter that you're spending this time to really, like, I'm just watching, like, put all the tiles into the floor. Like, this is what happened. And then this, in this place where you still remember all the details. So
Yeah.
I'm just so excited to get to be in that place with you. And I feel really honored, you know, to get to be the witness to your story.
Mm. Thank you, Jane. Yeah, it brings tears to my eyes to think about our daughter asking on her birthday, like, tell me the story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like too, you know, the for so many of us in the Holy Family and this lineage of mysticism that we walk through, we tell that story of birth, right? And all the time. And so there's something so precious about knowing each human as Christ child, right? And her getting to come to you and you getting to play that part of the story. And I don't know, it just all seems really precious. For
Yes.
me, I'm most interested in, you know, you were saying that you and Michael were here and you were going through this dueling program, and there was this question of like, would you or wouldn't you? And I think the first place of conception that I'm present to is like, what made you finally just say yes to this inner question, this inner call?
Mm. Well, for me, I felt like I always knew I wanted to be a mother, and there was a strong sense of there being one or more spirits with me, and like really wanting to walk that path and that journey, and also experience the full spectrum of being a human, of like carrying a child, of giving birth, of raising a child, and something very biological about that, the yearning. And then for me, there were some fears around just like really fully saying yes to it, um, knowing that there would be a loss of the maidenhood, a loss of the total freedom that we have to just be able to travel and then, drop of a dime. Or many times I just bought a flight like 4 days away and went to the Hawaii. And, I can still do things like that. Maybe it'd be better when she's a little bit older, but there's just more logistics and planning. And one of the big shifts that happen is like, yeah, life is not all about me anymore. I'm thinking and taking her into consideration in every choice that I make. And that's really humbling. And that's really beautiful. It's very selfless. It's different than just thinking about my autonomous self. Um, and for Michael, I think it was some healing around. Um, he had a story that he would have to give up a lot of his dreams in order to be a father, or that somehow there wouldn't be enough space for him to be a musician or to be a healer, or that he would have to step into this new role as provider. Um, and I think he's just in our culture seen a lot of people do that. And he had fears around like letting go of himself in that way. And so it took a lot of just him being open about that and seeing people who were living their lives as fathers and not giving up their identity and not, um, you know, going into that total codependent, like, I'm going to give up everything for this other being. And yeah, so slowly he came around to that. And I don't know exactly the moment for him, but he shared at one point just like, yeah, I do want to have a lineage. I do want to raise a child. That is something I want to experience in this life. So there was like, I think, a natural progression. And I also think men change a lot between the ages of like 28 and 35. And Michael's 35 now. And yeah, definitely. Like he just, wasn't ready earlier than now. And he's so in the present moment that he couldn't really like fathom it until the time came. So I just had to be really trusting and patient around his timing and our timing. And now that it's all happened, I'm like, oh my goodness, it couldn't have happened a moment earlier. Like this, it, we needed to go through everything we went through and all the, experiences we got to have just with each other and all the traveling that we did do. And especially that year in Hawaii, we felt so free and so just total expansion in the community and friendships and nature. And yeah, I long to go back there and to bring our daughter there and just waiting for the right timing.
Yeah. I know there are a lot of people here on the island that would really love to meet your daughter.
Oh,
You all are still very present here.
thank you.
Yeah.
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 So maybe I'll share a little bit about um, like the end of pregnancy and leading up to birth, because I did create a podcast at one point sharing about the first trimester. But I
Okay.
could go into a
Beautiful.
little bit of our move and then preparing for labor and all of that. Um,
Beautiful.
so yeah, Michael and I ended up in Colorado to birth our daughter. This is where Michael grew up in Boulder, and one of the things I wasn't expecting being pregnant was like how much I longed to be close to family and like my mother in particular. And we were considering moving to New York, where my family spends most of the year. Um, but when we actually looked, and it didn't feel right, and we kind of let go of all of that. And but my parents do spend 4 months a year in Aspen, Colorado, and Michael's parents are here, and just kind of landed as a place like we don't know if this will be forever, but we feel a longing. We've been very far away from our families for a very long time, and there was a desire to reconnect. Um, and so we followed that thread to our home where we are now. And when we moved, I think I was about 6 months pregnant, and I wasn't expecting to go through so much grief. It was like, so like, did I make the right choice? And here in the middle of winter. And I think part of that was the move, but I think part of that was actually just like going through that big shift of maiden to mother and like actually just allowing grief and transition and change to like come up within me and to be transformed and felt. And I was very much like in a cocoon phase in those final months of just being in the dead of winter and like all, no leaves on the trees and the snow coming down. I haven't had a full winter in years. I've been in California for like 11 years. um, so part of me was just totally like regretting it and like, why am I here? But the other part of just like, yeah, getting to be close to my mom, to family. We had some really good visits and time together to be in this phase. And we found our midwives and started to plan a home birth. And that was interesting because no one in our immediate families was really super familiar with that or had gone on that path. And it took me until took me until 1 month before her birth that I actually told my parents that I was planning a home birth.
What? Oh my
Yeah.
God, you were
It just,
trying to keep it like you were trying to keep it a secret or like
well,
you just
not,
couldn't get there yet or what?
it just didn't come up in conversation and I didn't bring
Oh
it up.
man.
And then there came a point where I was like, okay, I think I need to tell them. Um, and that took a lot of
Did your
courage.
mom freak out?
No. So what I decided to do is I wrote a letter and I included resources in the letter for them to like watch this documentary and some books and just some, and also I shared like I'm not interested in changing my mind, just so you know. So there wasn't really room for any kind of like, let's persuade her otherwise. Um, and my mom's response was she said, I showed your letter to dad, and my dad's actually a physician. So I wasn't sure how that would go over, but she's like, he just said you have a mind of your own. And then she told me a little bit about about her birth. Um, yeah, she was like, I'm glad you're close to a hospital. That was the other thing about being where we are in Boulder. It's like we're a 5 minute drive away from this really beautiful, progressive hospital. And that felt really good and choosing to be here. Because we looked at having our baby in Kauai, and for our first birth, just so much unknown. Like we would have been a good hour, 45 minutes away from the nearest hospital. And even with that, like I think they don't have a NICU there. So it's like if any baby actually
Oh
needs like
wow.
real support, they have to take a helicopter to Oahu. And that felt just like kind of daunting of like if you in the
Yeah.
if you really need it. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, my mom was like, glad you're close to a hospital and glad you told us. And that was that. It was kind of like, yeah, they gave their support, and it felt like a weight off my back to just know that I was supported in that choice. And when I was looking for midwives, I would ask questions around just really looking for people who trust birth, really people who are inherently just like believe in women's bodies. And I know I shared a little bit about my birth vision of just really wanting to be like not like wanting that. I really wanted a wise woman there, like a midwife, someone who had been at many births before, but I wanted someone who would be like very kind of sitting in the corner and like letting it, me go through the process without um, intruding or trying to check me all the time or um, and so that when we found our midwife, her name is Lo, we had a call with her, and both Michael and I were like, we really like her. And I also knew that the midwife would be really important for Michael. Like, Michael was going to need support through the whole thing. And I also was intuitively feeling like less people was better. So I went through this whole doula training and I kind of went back and forth. Do I want a doula there? I knew I had a lot of the skill and knowledge within my own self. And I felt like I only want a doula there if there's happens to be someone I meet that I'm just so connected to and feel so safe with. Otherwise, I just want less people there. And the midwife and Michael will be enough. And the midwife actually, most midwives work this way, that they bring in a secondary midwife as you get to like the couple hours or an hour or so before birth, just in case both the baby and the mom need support at the same time, that there's two people that can be there for that.
Wow.
So Lo and her team, there are three midwives actually, and we would trade off and meet all three of them through the pregnancy. And we didn't know which one was going to be the midwife at our actual birth. So it was a real, like, just having to trust, even though Lo was the first one we connected with, and we really felt good and safe with her. Um, And it turned out the day I went into labor, she was the one on call, and she was the one who was at our house
Wow.
like immediately. And she was covering for one of the other midwives' shifts because she got sick. And so it was just like very attuned. And I'll get into it a little more of the astrology and everything, but I was like checking the astrology
Whoa.
the days before, just wondering like, is she going to be born in the Cancer moon or the Leo moon or the, um, and I was
Oh
noticing
my
that
God.
Mars was exalted in Capricorn, and what else? Saturn was Swan Capricorn. This is all in the Vedic system of like what's actually happening in real time, the constellations. And there was Mars and Venus were in a planetary war, which means that they're within 1 degree of each other. And I was like, okay, baby, just wait a few more days. Like let's wait so that Mars and Venus aren't in planetary war anymore. And just because it makes it a little more
Wow.
challenging in your chart when two planets are so close together. But it turned out when she was born, Mars and Venus were far enough apart. They weren't in planetary war. And, and also, what was the other one? Jupiter and the sun were really close, and which means Jupiter is combust,
Wow.
which makes it dim some of Jupiter's light. Jupiter's like the guru, the teacher, and Jupiter was no longer combust when she was born. So all of that was
Wow.
I was really kind of talking to her and just being like, I know you probably already know your birth time, um but just in case, like life will be a little easier if you just wait these few more days. And
Man, and I'm so present to as I'm listening to you, right? There's one of the threads I'm tracking is this way that you really wanted the natural intelligence of your body and your being to be honored by the midwives, and like just to trust at such a deep level that there's this huge cosmic primordial primal intelligence running through. And I'm struck, as I'm listening to you share about the astrology, that this wisdom that I happen to know part of what you've been through, like what your Mahadasha has been over the past period of time. And part of all of this wisdom that you gained in K2 and all of this, like that your daughter was born into a cradle of that wisdom, and that part of that primordial communication between mother and daughter is, baby, I know the astrology, like hold off 12 more hours, and like, and that is part of her inheritance, that's
yes,
part of her legacy, her lineage, is to be able to receive that. And maybe she already knew, or maybe she knew that she was picking a mother that would be able to guide her in that way too. And so she didn't have to
yes,
know every single thing.
yes. And the interesting thing, so I checked our Western astrology charts. We are both Pisces, both Scorpio rising, and both Leo moon. And like all three of the
What?
signs are exactly the same in the Western. So then on the Eastern,
Oh,
we are also very
bless.
similar. We're both Libra rising in the Eastern, but she's still Pisces sun and Leo moon in the Eastern, and mine are a little different. But it's like we have such a overlap. She came at such a similar sky just to when I was born. So we'll just like be able to
Wow,
understand
that's
each other.
incredible. Totally.
Yeah.
Wow, and I'm thinking about, when we talk about the healing spiral or the evolutionary spiral, and how we kind of spiral around at these same junctures but just at deeper levels. And as you were saying that, I was just seeing kind of like the hologram, right, of like she's like a more evolved, younger, more, present, because she's born in a different part of the collective experience version of you,
Mm,
in your soul.
yes.
And that's truly that experience of mothering, but at a very concrete level based on your astrology.
Yes. Yes. So, okay. So, what else about the preparing for labor? There's one thing I wanted to mention about this book I read through my doula training. It's called Sacred Birthing, Birthing a New Humanity. And it was a very esoteric book about very spiritual about birth and everything being goes through and that journey. Um, and one of the things she recommended, which I really took to heart, was this prayer that she invited us pregnant women to say before bed. And I wanted to share that if there were any other pregnant women listening. And um, it would go, I would just say, like, Great Spirit, I call upon the devas of creation, the medical experts of humanity, the nature kingdom, my higher self, my baby's higher self, Michael's higher self, to be here with us now. And these spirits are there, like helping the soul go through this portal of pregnancy. And every night I would pray that she grow to her optimal blueprint, and also that she be in the most ideal position for labor, and that I would visualize, even because the most ideal position for a baby for labor is um, their spine to be out towards the belly and their head to be down. And even in the actual labor, they have to turn their head. I believe it's spine to the left, little feet over to the mom's top right of the belly for to go through the pelvis. So the baby's head will go down sideways, and then they kind of spin out. And then that's to avoid yeah, like back labor, which is when the baby's spine is pressing against mom's sacrum and pelvis, and that can be really painful. So I was like visualizing so much and just kind of communicating to the baby, like, hey, this is the most ideal way to be. Let's definitely be this way. And she actually,
Mm.
really early, ever since I started seeing the midwives, like, I think, I don't know exactly when it was, 28 to 30 weeks, they were already like, she's head down. She's really deep in your pelvis, really low. And I was just like, okay, working. Like I'm this prayer and I'm talking to her. And I also watched this class. It was called Spinning Babies, which is really helpful. So when we tend to, when we sit, like we'll lean back and things like that. And gravity will actually, if we're leaning back too much or lying on our back, the baby's spine will like turn so that it's facing mom's spine, which is not ideal if we're leaning back. But if a woman is leaning forward, baby's spine is going to be more facing out. And even like cat cow is really good in labor or leading up to labor for baby spine to be in that right position for gravity to help, because the spine is heavier. So it'll come down that way. So in the Spinning Babies, she talked about, like, think about your belly button like a flashlight, and you always want it to be pointing down. And so like leaning forward a little bit and not like leaning back when you're sitting in a chair. Um, and then there was this other pose I would do sometimes, which just helps the baby like kind of come out a little bit from the pelvis, and then to like reorient and have a little more space. And it was actually like doing a dolphin pose, but like you bring your forearms to the ground, but you put your knees up on the edge of a couch. So it's like your forearms are on the ground and then your hips are up high, and it just helps the baby kind of like come out for a second, reorient, and then you only do it for a short amount of time, because you don't want to be doing like full
Wow.
on inversions, and because the baby could actually like start to flip or think. Anyway, so those were two things that I did quite a bit of, just like helping the baby be in the right position, and really thinking about it and praying and visualizing, and then I would visualize my birth a lot too. And I even wrote in my journal, like, in the past tense, what would I want this birth to be like? And
Mm.
it was very similar when it actually happened. So that was all really helpful. Um, yeah, I'll pause. Any questions before I keep going?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have 5 million questions. And I'm really present to the devotion that even before she arrived, just this devotion you had to really ensuring that you were tuning your consciousness in a way that was creating, just as you said, I think optimal conditions for her arrival here. And wow, I'm also just remembering, something I'll just offer into the field, and we'll see if it continues to play out as you tell the story. But one of the things that Keone, my teacher here in the Hawaiian Islands, shares about is that when birth is held in its optimal fashion, we can preserve memory. Mm-hmm. Same as the Tibetans say that when we die consciously, we preserve the memory of that lifetime. Mm-hmm. And so I'm present to, and he talks about it in terms of the spinal column, that when there's like no trauma and when we're able to hold in this really powerful way, that all of that memory from her other lifetimes, from her soul's, arsenal, Akashic records, is preserved, and they don't have to go through that split. So I'm watching how you were already doing that, right? Even in all of this preparation for her arrival, you were setting those conditions for her thriving.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually a lot of Barbara's mission in having her sacred birthing school on Kauai, is to preserve the consciousness, like the high consciousness of these beings, so that they can have gentle births or soft births, she calls them, so that they can preserve as much of their knowing and their higher consciousness coming in to this world. Yeah.
Wow. It makes me want to go take that class. It feels like maybe I'm supposed to do that. Yeah,
it's really beautiful and powerful. And we would say the Hawaiian prayers every time to start class and to close class. It was really beautiful. Yeah. And so nice to have like a rite of passage of just feeling like being witnessed by an elder. I think her and I both knew like motherhood was near for me. And she was like, just so you know, people tend to get pregnant when they take this class with me. So be very careful unless you are ready.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah. And so many of us, right? Like our mothers, God bless them, they just didn't have access to this level of wisdom that we have now. And so what a special gift to have an elder who had that lineage, that remembrance intact, to be with you and to transmit this information.
Yes.
So I'm curious, like all of this preparation, because I've heard this from so many of my friends who've given birth. It's like there's all this preparation, and then the contractions start, and the primal intelligence takes over. And just like any other moment in our lives, when we surrender at a deep cellular level to the mystery, we're no longer in control. So I'm just wondering, like, what happened for you in that moment when you felt your water break, and how you navigated that part of the journey?
Yes. Well, definitely. I've heard other people say this before too. It's like you prepare like the music and the candles and all the things, and like in the actual active labor, like none of that matters. I don't think any of our candles got lit. and like I lost my phone within the first hour, and it was connected to the speaker and it was playing my playlist, but at some point like we couldn't find the phone, and it reached the end of the playlist, so it was just playing whatever. Luckily it was so good, but I'll go back a little bit because I'll just want to share one thing about my diet in pregnancy and the day of labor. I now feel myself coming back more into like my natural diet state, which was much more vegetarian. But in pregnancy, I really felt called to eat meat, which was interesting because I had been a true like vegetarian for 4 years, and then I would have meat just occasionally. And yeah, one of the things that was very nourishing for my body, I actually had a dream while I was on Kauai, and I asked my body, I was starting to feel really weak. I was like only 8 or 9 or 10 weeks pregnant. And is there anything that my body's needing that I'm not getting? And I had this dream that I was playing soccer and I was like, could barely get to the ball and was like missing the ball every time I would get near it. And then at the end of the game, someone came up to me with a plate and it had filet mignon on it. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't eaten cow in 11 years. And the next day, it's a little tricky, hard to get filet mignon on the island. I think I went to
Yeah.
the Healthy Hut, and they happened to have some grass-fed beef meatballs that were available. So I did have some of that. And throughout the pregnancy, just now and then, I would eat some red meat. And I think that was when I actually think about it, and I look at my daughter now, and like all her muscles and her bones and her eyes and her skull and everything that has been was made inside my body, it makes sense. I'm like, yeah, I really needed that. Really needed more sustenance, more protein, more of just like life force to be giving and growing that being in my body. So really, yeah, just grateful that I kept an open mind around all of that. I think it was very nourishing for me. But the whole pregnancy, I didn't have filet mignon until it was, and I had thought our daughter was going to be born March 14th. That was the day that when I would tune in, I would feel like March 14th. That was just what I was attuning to. And so I had everything ready to go by March 14th. And March 14th comes and no baby. And so that day, Michael and I went out for a walk. And I, for the very first time, decided to try the breast pump. I was like, I have no idea how this thing works. But apparently, a couple other pregnant women I knew said they were already making colostrum. And I was alone at home and was like, I'm just going to try this out and see I'm going to need to know how to use this. So, and apparently, pumping is something that can help stimulate labor. And before March 14th, because of all the astrology stuff, I was like, not wanting to stimulate labor at all. And then finally on March 14th, like I wrote baby a letter and I was like, I'm ready for you to come when you are. And I tried just a little bit on the breast pump and I had a little bit of colostrum. I was like, cool, like I know how that works now. And then Michael and I went for a long walk and then after our walk that we were like, well, this might be near, the end of when we can actually go out to dinner, like just the two of us. And do you want to go out to dinner? So we went out to this fancy Boulder restaurant and I ordered filet mignon. And so it was like the $50, like high end everything, And so I had that meal. It was delicious, and I had leftovers, and we brought it home. And we slept really well that night. And um, I had dreams, I think, of flowers blossoming. It was like marigolds and zinnias and black-eyed Susans and like all these flowers from my childhood. And the next morning, we were lying in bed, and I was like, it feels like a little bit wet, like in my underwear. And I didn't think too much of it. I was like, oh, maybe, I don't know. And so I just like got up to go to the bathroom and um, flushed the toilet and I stood up and then a little more water dripped out. And I was like, oh, could this be? Could this be the water breaking? I had no idea. Like, I didn't know if it was just a trickle or if it was like a lot of water to expect. I just didn't know. So I told Michael, and he's all excited, and I'm all excited. And we're like, we're having a baby today. And I was just, yeah, so happy in the timing and that, it was actually officially like the day before our official due date, according to the midwives. But I also think when I really look back at my menstrual cycle, our due date actually probably would have been more like 4 or 5 days before that. Um, anyway, so yeah, so we're right in the window of when we imagined she might come, and yeah, and and then I looked at my phone and I had a text from my mom, and it said, "Hoping today's the day, feeling baby near," or
Oh,
something like that. And I was just like, she is so psychic. And
wow.
yeah, I didn't respond. I was just like, I'm just gonna see what happens. And I was like, well, what do I do? Like, this might be a while. Um, before like anything actually happens. So I had gotten into a flow of doing an Ashtanga yoga practice several times a week. And I have a studio right like 2 blocks away. And I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to go to the studio and do my yoga practice. And then I'll feel really aligned and open if labor starts soon, maybe it will help. And so I'm getting all dressed um, and just like, put a little pad in the underwear in case any more water came out. And as I'm getting my yoga mat, my jacket, Michael gives me a kiss and I'm heading out the door. Whoosh. Literally water just spilled. But it was like this huge, like my whole pants got wet. Like it was like the
Whoa.
full on water breaking moment. And I was like, oh, okay. That's what it's like when the water breaks. Wasn't just like this little trickle and that was it. And like, okay, I had to like change my pants and was like, well, I don't think I'm going to go to the yoga studio. That
Probably a
would
smart
be,
decision.
yeah, that would be embarrassing if it looks like I wet my pants more. And so I stayed home, but I did a full yoga practice at home. And that was really just helpful, feeling good in my body. And Michael and I were so, excited. And there was so much to do of just like getting the tub ready and everything. But we paused everything and I did a full yoga practice and he did a full meditation. And I'm like so glad that we did that. It was like we came back to our bodies and grounded. And like more water was coming out as I would do yoga and I'd have to like go to the bathroom and like I was just using washcloths at that point to like hold it in and
Oh my gosh.
changing them out. Yeah, it felt amazing. It's just like this beautiful clear water was just like in my belly that this baby was in for these 9 months. And yeah.
Wow.
and
Wow.
And so I actually didn't feel any contractions for hours. It was like the water broke, but I was like, okay, we're just going to get ready. I think I was like doing some laundry and Michael was starting to get the birth tub ready. And then I was like, well, I need to eat like a really good meal because I hear that, women are not really hungry when they're in labor. It's kind of like a medicine journey, if you're on something, you don't really want to be eating. So luckily, I had my leftover filet mignon, and we sautéed some
Oh my god.
kale and eggs, and like I tried to just have like a lot of protein, and I ate this really big meal. At this point, it was maybe around 11 a.m. And yeah, so ate that meal, and then I was doing some writing. I had some things I wanted to write about that I was reflecting on that week. And then maybe around 1 p.m., I started to feel some contractions. And I was like it was very light, like getting the room ready. And I got out my drum and like my crystals. And I made a little altar over here. And it had a picture of my mom holding me when I was a baby. And then at that point, we called the midwife and just let her know, like, yeah, we're feeling some contractions. Our water broke. And then I let my family know and a couple other people. I didn't want a lot of people to know I was in labor, but I had like three girlfriends and my parents and my sister. So let them all know. They were all holding the field and lighting candles um, and so I was starting to time the contractions, and they were like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, like kind of erratic. It was like that for maybe an hour or so. And then around 2 p.m. or so was they started being really regular, and it was like every 3 minutes or like every 3 to 5 minutes. And that's when they say it's like, okay, definitely call the midwife, definitely like let them know. And I had no idea, like, if labor, I had heard some stories of women, even just the month before. I had quite a few pregnant friends during the journey, some women that had like 3 day long labors, which can be common. I knew sometimes knowing how your mom's labor went or women in your family can be an idea. And they actually had really short labors. So I was hoping that I would have a short labor but not really knowing. But yeah, it was starting to be every 3 to 5 minutes. And then I'm not exactly sure when the midwife came, but when she came, it was like I needed her. I was starting to really feel it. And
Wow.
like my clothes were off mostly at that point. I don't even like know how or why. um,
Wow.
I think probably because there was just a little bit of blood coming out, and I just like didn't, yeah, we had so much we needed to prepare in the home for labor, like extra waterproof, like things over the mattresses and getting the birth tub ready. And I had always envisioned it in water. And also, you never know what you're going to want or feel in the moment. Um, yeah, so I was leaning over the bed in one of our bedrooms, and the contraction would come, and I would just like lean over the bed and make sounds, and then it would pass, and then it would, it'd be okay. And Michael it's like I felt like he was there with me a lot, but he was also getting things ready, like the tub and whatever else. And when my midwife came, she was just so gentle and loving, and she came in, and I was really feeling it, and she was just like looked at me with such awe and was just like, you're doing so great. And at that point I was just like, wow, I really needed her, really needed another woman to just be there. And her
Yeah.
calm presence like was just what I needed. And I really felt like, wow, if I was, because labor was coming on pretty strong, if I didn't have that kind of support, and like so many women don't have that kind of support, um, I could really see how you just feel kind of out of control. Like I would feel like, yeah, I need to go to the hospital. Yeah, I need an epidural. Like if I didn't have that, a wisdom keeper there, someone just being like, no, this is normal. You've got this. Like, I'm here for you. I'll hold your hand. And that was really crucial.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
then
I'm really, as I'm
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh, it's like such a precious moment. And I think the thing that was coming forward for me as you've been kind of, it's funny, it's like this descent, right? That you're even sharing. We can feel the quality of descent, even in like the speed and what's happening in the house and starting to come like, it's less of a descent, but like just coming more and more into the center, right? Of like
Yeah.
where we are. And I was about to ask you, like, what was your mental state? And I felt even as you're sharing kind of that part of the wild feral animal that's just like, oh my God, I can't do this. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then the gift of just having someone who's tread that path so many times, who's just
Yes.
like, this is this moment. This is this moment. I've got you. You're right here.
Yeah.
And this, like the value of just having someone who can look at you and say, you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yes.
Breathe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and that was about the time when time started being really like non-existent and different.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like from that moment I remember being leaning over the bed to the moment she's actually born felt like almost no time at all when I think back on it. Oh, it was about 8 hours, like the from when I really started
Wow.
feeling contractions to when she was born. Um, but yeah, no concept of time. And then the other thing was involuntarily, I was making sounds. Like I didn't even know I was making sounds, almost like that separation from your body type thing. My body was just making sounds and loud sounds and screams and roars and like just to get through the feeling of the contractions, which was very unexpected because I'm a pretty quiet person and I felt like, oh, I'm just going to want to be alone in a dark room. And actually, I wanted someone with me the whole time. I wanted someone's hands I could hold, and I was being loud. So those were the things that were unexpected.
I don't
Yeah,
know, something about what you're sharing, it just makes me really emotional, you know, just like I think what I'm present to is just, you know, in the journey of that process that you met parts of yourself you didn't know, you know, before. This part that's like, no, I actually need someone, or this wild animal, you know, and until we have those moments in our lives where we're up against the edge of everything we've ever known, we don't even get to meet certain parts of our feminine nature,
yeah.
you know? And just so, like, feeling so much joy for you that you got to meet those parts.
Mhm. Yeah. And I was trying to remember to do my breathing. Like I wanted to be doing my box breathing, which is like ujjayi breath, like inhale, hold, exhale, hold, inhale, and I wasn't able to like really do it during the contractions at some point because it was just like this force takes over. But the thing that would help was if Michael was counting, and even if the counting made no sense at all, like he would just sometimes be like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 1, 2, 3. Like he would just do random counting. But it really helped me because I'm like, oh, okay, it's like almost over. And then the other thing that really helped was a contraction would start and I'd be like, oh God, oh no, I don't know if I want to do this. Like, and he would be like, it's almost over. It's almost over as soon as it started. And because the contractions were only like 45 seconds long, I think, like, that really helped. Just knowing like him saying that to me as soon as it started, I was just like, okay, it's almost over. And it would really feel like this internal wave, like the internal, like something was coming up and in from and taking over me. But the strange thing is, I couldn't tell you exactly what it felt like. Like, as soon as it was over, labor was over, like I can't even remember exactly what a contraction felt like.
Wow.
It was just so, you're so in it. And it's like the body is designed in this way that you forget. So that probably so that you do it again. But it's like so amazing. Like it's so intense when you're in it,
Wow.
but you can't really, I couldn't really recall exactly what it felt like. Like I could, in the beginning, it felt like, yeah, cramping, kind of like a menstrual cycle, contracting of your womb. But as it started getting more intense, all I knew was that making sounds helped me get through it. And it was really intense. And then it would pass. And I would be pretty cognizant in between the contractions. So yeah, so that went on for a while,
Wow.
and I think mostly in the bedroom, like leaning over the mattress. And then at some point the tub was ready and the water was in the tub. I got to go in the water and the contractions were still really hard, but it was very helpful to just feel like in the water. And And also something that really helped was having a washcloth on my back, like a wet washcloth. Usually if it was cold, that would feel really good. And someone pressing on my back. There's a lot of sensation in my lower back. Um, so it would be either Michael or Lo doing that, or someone holding my hands, and eventually it started getting dark. And at some point, Lo was like, she didn't offer the whole time. She was just like, if you want, I can check to see how dilated you are. And it was like, so no pressure, like, and I was like, okay, why not? And and so she did, and she was like, wow, you're like almost there. And that was really reassuring. And she was like, there is a little bit of your cervix that is still on baby's head, but I can like feel baby's head. And um, she's like, there's a pose that I think could be really helpful for you if you're willing to try it. And it's to lie on your side in the bed and during a contraction, doing bicycle legs. So, like one knee up, one leg down, and then the other knee up and the other leg down, kind of doing that a few times during a contraction. And I just like so trusted her that and was like, okay. And like part of me didn't want to, but I was like, okay. And so I just lied on the bed and I did that. And it was really intense. And I think I did like a high pitched scream during that. That was like a real like, ah. But then it passed, and one or two contractions later, she checked again, and she was like, wow, like you're even further. There's still like this little tiny, like little lip of your cervix that is still on baby's head. But my body was already starting to push. I had been in the water at that point, and it was happening again involuntarily. I could feel a contraction would come. And the only thing that would help me feel better was if I like let my body do this downward, like kind of pushing. And,
Wow.
and she was like, try not to push, because if your cervix isn't fully dilated and you start pushing, your cervix can get swollen and it can make it harder. So she was like, if you are willing, you would need to lie on your back just for one contraction, butterfly legs, and let me just lift this little part of your cervix up above baby's head. You'll be fully dilated and fully ready to push. And so she's like, would you want to do that? And I was like, oh, like again, this internal mind of like, I don't want to, but okay. Like the feeling was like, this is going to help it go faster. So I did. And it was super uncomfortable lying on my back. I couldn't imagine having to lie on my back the whole time. It would be awful. So laid on my back and did the butterfly legs. And then it was like contraction came. She like did this little lift. It was so quick. And she's like, okay, you can push, like go be free, push. And I don't know what time it was at that point, but probably later in the evening, because in my mind, it felt so quick from when I started pushing to when baby was here. And it's so funny. I didn't remember this until later. Michael reminded me, but it was getting to these moments and I like really needed him. He was like trying to take a break to eat a sandwich and he was like sitting. He was like, I needed him so much in the labor. He was like sitting on the floor of the kitchen eating a turkey sandwich, like trying to have a moment to break. I'm like calling him over.
Oh my God.
And so he came over and he sat on the bouncy ball right in the edge of the tub. And I was leaning over the edge of the tub, most of my body submerged. And we're just holding hands. And every time the contraction would come, I would push or my body would push. It wasn't even like I was pushing. It was just happening like this. And I could feel. And So I decided to feel what was happening down there, and I put my finger inside, and I felt the baby's head, and she was literally just like the tip of my index finger inside, like that close. And it was all like, I was like, this is the baby's head. It was like so squished, but it was like going through this canal, and it really does get compressed. So yeah, at this point, I remember, yeah, almost like a pause or just feeling like fully cognizant, and kind of like Camille, the second midwife, was there at that point, kind of like sitting in the corner taking notes and looking at the clock to make sure she gets the birth time. And they're both just, I was like, I can feel the baby's head. And they're like, yeah, you're doing it. Yeah, like you're almost there. And it was just so sweet. They're like, totally were just giving me my space and letting me orchestrate it. And I'm kind of looking at them like, I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, you're doing it. and, uh, and pretty soon after that, like Michael's holding my hands and he just whispers to me. And I think it was hard for him seeing me go through the contractions. And he just whispered in my ear, like, you can push your baby out on this next one. Like, if you want to, you can push your baby out. And and so something about him saying that, I did. It was just like the next contraction came and I pushed with it, and she just shot out into the water. And and so surreal. I think I was shocked. Michael was shocked. Midwife was shocked. Maybe, I don't know. She came over and I picked her up, and she picked her up with me, and they brought her to my chest, and her eyes were wide open. She was just like, like she was in shock, just like looking around. Um, it was so surreal. And
Wow.
but she wasn't breathing right away. So they were like, okay, like this all happened so quick too. So that moment of us all being in
Yeah.
shock and holding her to my chest, and then Lo was like helping me get out of the tub because we're totally connected, and we had asked not to cut the umbilical cord right away. And I was pretty weak and needed to like sit down. And then Lo has the baby, and maybe Michael. Um, she hasn't taken a breath yet. So her eyes are wide open. She's fully cognizant. And they're like, okay, baby, like, you gotta breathe. So they're clearing out her nose and her mouth. And I think they gave her a little bit of oxygen then. I mean, it all happened so quick. And then they gave her some chest compressions. And it was enough time that I was like, just started calling on the guides and was like calling on Jesus Christ and like all of those Davids of creation and all of them to be here and to help her breathe in that moment. And for Michael, I think that moment was really scary. It was, maybe 2 minutes, I don't know. But they were, the midwives were, both of them were fully there, like just helping her helping her breathe. And, but I knew too that she was connected to me in the placenta through the umbilical cord. So she was receiving still oxygen through that way. But yeah, and then it was like long enough for it to be scary, but short enough that like she then took a breath, and we were all just like, okay. But that was a scary moment.
Wow.
And like, I'm so glad
Wow.
that the midwives were both there and knew exactly what to do and were acting right away. And yeah, and I think for Michael, that was an important moment because it was this last moment of like, do you really want this? Like, your baby's here. Do you
Wow.
really want this? Like, for us to like claim that fatherhood and motherhood. And he said internally that was what was happening for him, and he was like, yes, I want this, I want this. And like, and just start breathing. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
baby was good. And like they were doing any last things, wrapping her up, keeping her warm. And then they like kind of looked over at me, and I'm like leaning against the edge of the tub, just like kind of in euphoria, kind of in shock, kind of like just very weak and not. And so they come over to me and just are like, "Are you okay? Like, how is it going?" They were giving me coconut water and some frozen mango slices that we had, and I felt very weak. And it was something that would happen in my pregnancy sometimes, just this feeling of low blood sugar or um, just like not fully being able to like stand up or like feeling, yeah, just needing sustenance and support. So they were asking if I wanted a little bit of oxygen. I think they gave me some. And there was like a split second where I closed my eyes and it was like almost like a falling asleep moment or like a slightly passing out moment. And they like slowly laid me down on the ground. And then I came to again. And they're like, I think you
Wow.
might want some IV fluids. Um, so they're asking me if I wanted IV fluids, what it would do. They were basically like, yeah, it'll, if you're dehydrated, like it'll just give you more energy and help your body. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And it's a little hard to, get at my veins. My veins are small, so that took a little while. But I did take like a bag of IV fluids with them. And all while this is happening, Michael was holding her. And so he was like in this chair holding her. And they told him, like, take off your shirt, like, bring her skin to skin with you. And he was doing that. And she was just totally like, she wasn't crying really. She just like has wide eyed and looking around. And
Wow.
we were still connected, like, with the umbilical cord. And then at some point, the midwives were like, Meredith, would it be okay if we cut the umbilical cord? I think it'd been like 45 minutes or so. They're like, it's not pulsing anymore. She's gotten everything, that from this placenta. It would be easier to us just to tend to you and to tend to baby. And I was like, okay, I'm okay with that. Let me let the baby know, like, we're going to cut this. You're going to be okay. You're going to breathe on your own now. And so cut the cord, and it was fine. I don't think she cried. It was just, I love that, they were so on board just to talk to the baby and let her know everything that was happening. And um, yeah, and what else? And then, yeah, about an hour after they were like, okay, it would be really great if the placenta could be born now. And they're very gentle, but also like kind of trying to follow um, the protocols that are the most, there's been the most statistics around, like, if the placenta comes out within an hour, it's less likely of different things that could happen. So I was like, okay. And she was like, could I give you a shot for it to come out? And I was like, no, I don't want a shot. So, so I was like, let me just do some different positions and move around and stand up. And so I did that. And the placenta came out. So, and it was so like, it was actually quite small. And at some point we got to low examined it, and she's just like so into all of this stuff, and it's just like, wow, look at your placenta. And like she showed it to me. And um our plan is to bury the placenta on we so it's in our freezer. It's still in the freezer right now. But we're gonna bury it in a little ceremony. We're just deciding where that's gonna be, and probably on this family land that we have up in northern Minnesota, because it's it's going to be land that's going to be in our family forever, and was in our family since my grandfather. Be a place she can always visit. Um, and yeah, and then after all of that, it was like, okay, Meredith, like, could we help you stand up and go to the bedroom so that we can check you, just to see if there were any tears and things like that. So that was like a huge feat to stand up and like move to the bed and lie down, just like everything in my body like was so, it just takes so much out of you. But I did and laid down, and the midwife checked and she was like, and I think too, because our pushing was so fast, or at least it felt so fast, or she like kind of shot out. She's like, yeah, there's a tear here. There's a certain level of tears that midwives are comfortable stitching at home. And she's like, I'm not sure if this is like a second-degree tear, a third-degree tear. She's like, I'm sorry to tell you, but I would feel most comfortable going with you to the hospital to actually have this stitched. And, you know,
Oh,
at
wow.
that point, like just knowing first, she's like, what is in her scope and what isn't in her scope of practice. And she's like, I want this to heal so well for you. And I think that we should get it stitched at the hospital. And so that was kind of like, oh man, I have to leave the house.
Oh my
And she's like,
God.
but she's like, we don't have to leave right away, and we can take our time, and you can think about if you want to go all together as a family or if you want just you and me to go. So we're kind of like, again, I'm having more coconut water and thinking through all of this. And,
Oh my God. So
and
many things to think about at
yeah,
the
so
same
many
time. So
choices.
many
Like,
competing, yeah, priorities and choices and split
yeah.
second life altering decisions.
Yes. Yes. And so at this
Wow.
point, like, several hours had passed since the birth. Baby was really like stabilizing. They were monitoring her heart a bit. And at one point, they were like, her breathing is still pretty shallow. If you do go to the hospital, you might want to just have her run a few tests as well, just to make sure everything's okay. But it's also like we're at 5,000 feet of altitude here. It's like it is a little common. And then, like, so we decided, okay, we're all going to go to the hospital together. We're going to stay together as a family and with our midwife. And then at that point, they were checking her heart, and her breathing was totally normal. And we are like, well, should we still have her come? We're like, let's still have her come. So many choices. And then I was like, wow, I'm so glad we're only a 5-minute drive from the hospital. And
Okay.
actually, our midwife called in advance and told them everything that was happening. We didn't have to go through the emergency room. We arrived at the hospital door. There was someone there with a little wheelchair or a hospital bed for me, like just waiting right there. It was just so peaceful.
Oh,
Like we
wow.
just came in, I got to lay on this bed, and they rolled me right up to the OB who had got called in, and it was just, I was so grateful, like, wow, that these people exist and they're here in the middle of the night, and like, this, and that they were so kind. And so we all got to be together in the same room. And yeah, and the OB came in and she looked at my tear, and Lo got to be there too. And she helped answer all the questions. And there was really no judgment from anyone about having a home birth. They were just like, wanted to make sure they knew all the details. And um, Lo and the secondary midwife had like a very thorough report that was like just very helpful for them. And yeah, so they've used some lidocaine, didn't feel anything, had some stitches. It was actually not as bad as what Lo had thought. So luckily the OB was like, oh, this is going to heal fine. Did the stitches. While I was doing that, Michael was with the baby on the other side of the room. He's like, we both use EFT tapping. So he was doing something called surrogate tapping for her, which is like he taps on his body as if he was her, just to explain
Oh,
like everything happening. And um, it's so beautiful to just like, to go through something that could potentially be traumatic, and to be there with someone who's like clearing the trauma immediately from her system and explaining to her what's happening. And really, in a trauma, one of the signs is that you feel alone or a sense of hopelessness. And like she didn't have to have that all. It was like daddy was right there with her the whole time. They ran a few more tests. Um, it's hard being a parent, like having to make these choices of like, oh, do I let my baby just be in this safe little bubble at home with us, or the midwife says like it could be good to like do a few tests. She did have the delay in her breathing, and to just want to know that everything's safe and that you're doing everything in your capacity to help her. So ultimately everything was fine. Every test came back great for her. And then there's this whole thing with the hospital to get discharged where like you have to answer all these questions. And first they had to discharge me, and then they had to discharge baby. And the doctor that was with the baby was like, I'd really like the pediatrician to sign off with her. And the pediatrician doesn't get here until 8 a.m. And it was maybe 3 in the morning or something at that point. And they were like, but we'll just let you sleep a little bit if you like. And they gave us a bed. So we got to sleep a little bit. And then the pediatrician came in like first thing in the morning, and she's like, this baby has all like perfect tests. Why are you even need me? And she just signed off on it. And then we got wheeled out and like went home. So that was the journey.
Wow.
And yeah,
Wow.
reflecting on it all, it's like, I don't know. We got to receive like a little bit of everything, just like the home birth and what it's like to have a midwife and what it's like to be in the hospital. And, I didn't know what it would, I haven't been in a hospital since I was like 2 years old or something when I needed stitches and had an accident. But yeah, everyone was really loving there. And ultimately it was a fine experience. Um, and then begins like the journey of just being on your own with your baby. And we all tried to sleep. Um, I think it actually took Michael more time to recover from the whole birth than it did me.
How so? What's the
Um,
biggest adjustment been for both of you?
well, for Michael, he's just so emotionally sensitive. So it was just a lot to process emotionally. And my experience of going through the labor was very different from him watching the labor because me being in it, I had all these endorphins and oxytocin. And it's like, and as soon as it was over, I forgot what it felt like, like all of that. And for Michael, it was like it stayed with him. It was like this deep experience that of like, oh my God, I can't believe we went through that. That was so life or death, like every moment. And so there was a big adjustment for him of just like whew, healing from that and claiming fatherhood and integrating and definitely the first 2 to 4 weeks like took a lot. Like, my everything was healing in my body, my womb, my yoni, my like everything needed to heal, and I felt still very weak. And then the colostrum is there. The one part I forgot to mention was when she latched. Our midwife helped with that, just helping her latch to start taking, yeah, sustenance from the breast. And it was actually right when we arrived, like at the hospital all together. And yeah, I was holding her, and she showed me what it was like, and I was like, ooh, ouch! it hurt that first moment, but then she like, yeah, just showed me like what to expect and how to breastfeed like correctly and how to guide her, and so yeah, really grateful for all that because we did not have any problems really with breastfeeding. It was like she was gaining weight. So all babies lose a little weight the first like 2 or 3 days. Then as soon as the breast milk came in, she was gaining really good weight, like eating like 2 ounces a day, where like babies to be healthy is considered half an ounce a day is a good amount. So everyone was happy with that. Yeah. And there were a little bit of trouble down the line of like just, adjusting to sore nipples and finding the right latch and figuring everything out. But ultimately, felt really happy that we didn't have challenge with milk supply and all of that. So,
Wow.
yeah.
What does it feel like for you? Like, I feel like I just lived your birth with you, which is just an extraordinary privilege. I'm just like, wow, how did I get so lucky that this is what I'm doing on Friday morning? And wow, just I'm wondering what it feels like for you to really sit and recount the whole story and like how it feels for you right now.
Yeah, it feels really joyful. It feels like it's a medicine story. It feels like um, it's the full spectrum of human experience of, um, yeah, like climbing a peak and reaching the top, and then being faced with life or death, and like making this descent and coming down on the other side. Uh, yeah, it feels like ultimately when I think of the whole journey, I'm just so grateful, and I'm so grateful I had support every step of the way. And like also something I didn't mention in the early active labor, I totally had moments where I was envisioning us getting in the car and going to the hospital so that I could get an epidural. Like all those thoughts crossed my mind. And I'm so proud that and glad that like I had support and that I was able to go through it naturally the way I wanted to, and to feel like, wow, I really did that. That was intense. And and we did everything that we could to make it like the most peaceful experience for her as possible, and being responsible, and um yeah. So ultimately, like, I think in a way, babies do help orchestrate their births, and this is how it was meant to be. So, yeah, I feel at peace with it.
And as I listen to you too, I'm struck, I've listened to a handful of women share their birth stories, and I'm really struck just as a reflection for you of the amount of clarity that you have intact, because I know that people, women really do go into these really hypnotic states. And for so many women, there's also a trauma that occurs in that birth process, or what feels very traumatic. And when I hear their stories, there's a fragmentation to the story. There seem to be parts of the story that you can feel there's still a real pain body to that part of the birth, or there's a real clarity about this part. And I'm really present to how much clarity is in your field around it,
Mhm.
and how much
Yeah.
continuousness there is to it. And also it feels that this is both a part of your consciousness and Michael's consciousness and the consciousness of the midwife that you chose. That there was a lot of trust and slowness and intentionality, right?
Mhm.
Even in those moments, it wasn't like, oh, you have to have the placenta now, right?
Mhm.
Or you have to do this now. And it becomes this like fear-based life and death reality.
Mhm.
And just really struck by the imprint that gives your daughter, and what that creates for her in her consciousness, and just how many children don't get that. Yeah, that
Yeah.
like trusting, slow, intentional process. And Yeah, I think that's just one of the things I'm so struck by is the intentional, mindful nature. And something about that feels like it's what has allowed the crystallization, the clarity of this experience to exist
Mm. Mm. Thank you.
as I receive it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And I do think like I have done years of intentionally like womb healing, for myself um and also like I hear some women when they go into the portal of birth actually past traumas related to their womb like come to the surface to be faced or to be healed. Like I did feel very cognizant and clear the whole time, like going through. Um, and time felt different for sure, but yeah, there wasn't that feeling of like, oh, I have to face these hard things in myself or from my past. Um, and also, I feel like in a way my soul is familiar in the birth realms because I've also held so much space for women to heal their birth stories. Like that's actually something I've done a lot of for women is if they do experience trauma or did feel disempowered in any moment. I think one of the things women like they want most in a birth is like choice. Like I know women that had epidurals or had cesareans, but like they felt like they did everything they could and they chose it and they feel empowered about it. And there's some moments where that gets taken away from a woman and she doesn't feel like she has full choice, or it is like an emergency C-section and suddenly it's like there's no choice and you just are having to go through this deep surrender. And for those types of experiences, it is really helpful to have a loving guide just go back with you and relive it. And I use the EFT tapping to help people release trauma that they might be stored in their body, or even we use it with the baby in the memory to help the baby and through, and it can actually change relationships. Like I've done healing birth work with women and then they tell me like something's different between me and my child. Like something is
Wow.
yeah, that they feel like they got to relive it in their consciousness in a new way and imprint that into their cell memory in their body and with their baby. And then they get to have a new story with it. Um, it's helpful for any trauma we go through to be able to go back and have help and support and relive it. And
Totally. And to not to in that it sounds like in that reliving, like not be alone, right? And
yes,
that was another thing I was really struck by as you told your story was just this feeling of like when I needed someone, they were there. You know,
yes,
in that moment with the midwife came and you were really transitioning into that hypnotic, like fully surrendered state that you knew you weren't alone. And in that moment when you were really ready to give birth, that Michael was there.
yes,
And it's like speaks so much to the power of, just human relating, human relationships, the power of like the child wasn't conceived alone, the
yes,
child isn't born alone, the child isn't raised alone,
yes.
and what that
And
means for that union to be there.
mhm. And just how, like, when we're facing the edge of something so difficult, how different the experience could be when we receive a little bit of encouragement. Like when we have someone there who's just like, yeah, you can do this. I'm here with you. It's so amazing. Like that can help us go so much further. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, is there anything else you want to share? I feel like there's just wisdom. There's just like so much wisdom that can ooze out of you. Is
Yeah.
there anything
Thank
else?
you. I mean, well, then it was like it's been the last 6 weeks of raising a child. And I think. like it's the kind of thing that everyone says things about it. Mostly people, I've heard people say like, oh, it's so hard, things like that. And it is so hard in the beginning. Um, but like you can't really know until you live it. You can't really know what it's like waking up in those middle of the night or being tired or not knowing how to calm a crying baby or just like all these moments. And I just feel like, wow, I'm so lucky to like be a woman with privilege and to have support and to see like, and it's still so hard, like especially those first few weeks. And I can't imagine what it's like for some of these women that, don't have a partner or don't have um, people bringing them food or don't have enough money like to get what they need, or it's just wild. It's a lot. And there's so much like amazingness too, like I feel like the love grew, like rather than like that immediate, like seeing my baby and feeling like, of course there was love, but I feel like the love grew getting to know her, and spending time with her. It was almost just like, who's this stranger? Like when I first meet her, like it's such a shock of like, oh my God, now you were inside and now you're outside, and it's just a lot to adjust to.
I've heard that before.
And then, yeah, but to get to know her and to spend these nights with her um, and now she's starting to smile a little bit and she's starting to recognize us and she's actually starting to see us. Like the first 5, 6 weeks almost, like she can't even really see you. And she is just like this very selfless, constantly on, loving this little being. And now there's some reciprocation that's like coming in. It's very sweet to see her. Like, yeah. And there've been a few moments of like um being away from her for an hour or something. And then when I come back, I just like missed her so much. And I was so excited to see her again. Like that I didn't expect. And it's just really beautiful to feel. It's very purposeful. It feels like even though there have been these hard moments, I definitely tell myself like there's nothing else I'd rather be doing right now. Like this feels like the most meaningful and purposeful contribution that I can make as a human to our planet at this moment in time. It feels to raise this being consciously and with love. And of course, I want to be going back to some of my client work and programs, and I will be. But um, it's really beautiful to have this time and to give ourselves some time just to get to know each other. And that, yeah, this is the main thing I'm doing right now. And sometimes there's monotony. It's like, I think motherhood is like there's tiredness, there's like sometimes a feeling of so much to do, and then sometimes a feeling like, okay, it's just the same thing every day, like gotta do the laundry again or do the dishes again. But there's also like an inner strength that I've been calling upon that I haven't. It's like there's something I see in my parents now, especially like there were things about my dad. I would always see him like he just takes out the trash. Like there's no complaining. Like he just does it. And like there's kind of that inner strength of like, yeah, this is annoying to do this thing again or to, be a householder, but you just do it. And even like there was a moment when breastfeeding was feeling like my nipples were feeling really sore and I was like, is there something wrong? And I saw the lactation consultant and we were like, maybe she has a tongue tie. I don't know. And at some point I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to let this sore nipple thing bother me. And within a week, like it got so much better. And there's just something about like, you just choose like, I'm just not going to let this bother me. And you just do it. And There's
which
wisdom in
is
that.
like the ultimate. Totally. It's like that's the ultimate heart of the warrior, right? It's
Yeah.
like, this is here, this is what's happening. And I can spend copious amounts of mental energy resisting it and cause myself undue pain in the process, or I just like show up to life and what it's asking.
Yes.
And I hear that kind of just that like bodhisattva, like this is what it is, and here I am.
And I actually learned that through cold plunges. So that was something I was doing a lot in. It's something I was doing a lot in Kauai and
I've been feeling
before.
that too.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like when I'm about to do a cold plunge, I just go, okay, there's no thinking. You just do it. And you plunge into the water. You don't complain about it. You don't like try to dip one toe in and then run away. Just do it. And I've
Totally.
I've done I think I did 3 cold plunges in the Boulder Creek while I was pregnant, which I was like, oh, it's like preparation for labor and like motherhood. And it's so amazing. It's like you always feel so good after doing a cold plunge. So
Always.
yeah.
Mm. I love that you made that connections. I've had that similar experience too. Like I was just up at Makaleha yesterday, and I have this thing I started doing where I'm like, there's no such thing as cold. There is no such thing as cold. You just,
Yeah.
you go in,
Yes.
because the reward is so much greater than, and there's no use in all of that questioning. It's
Yeah.
not actually helpful in any way.
Mhm.
So I totally get that.
Yeah. It feels like such a maturity. That's what I feel like these last 6 weeks for Michael and I. It's just, yeah, caring for another being. There's just new maturity. And yeah, I think it's just the beginning. So I feel like there's just so much to look forward to. And already at 6 weeks, I do feel like it's easier than it was at 1 week or 2 weeks. It's like you probably my capacity is expanding to show up as I'm learning how to do it. And that helps it all get easier. And also maybe she's not as demanding now, even like there's so many diaper changes in those first couple weeks and so many, yeah, just so many new adjustments going from not having a child to having a child. But yeah, you expand and grow, and it's really cool. I can't believe that this is how humans are made and that so many people on this planet go through this journey, right? Like so many choose to walk this path.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a lot of humility and respect
Yeah.
for all the parents, especially those with multiple children. So wild.
Yeah, because just because it's so funny, when we get the privilege of knowing people who have conceived and are going to have children. And I think you and I was probably one of the first people to, just by circumstance, to learn,
Yeah.
of this baby. And I can remember sitting in the grass eating Indian food out at Saisha's place, and just really feeling her presence, this child's presence through the two of you. And I would just love to know what she's like. How do you receive her beingness?
I feel, I mean, there's a lot of sweetness, and there's also like this underlying kind of like ambition or like direct drive that she has. I feel like when she wants something, she really wants it. Like she goes for it. And she'll be very, very clear about that with her willpower. um,
Uh
and
huh.
also just there's, yeah, so much sweetness and curiosity. Um, and also just knowing a bit about her chart, because I did a whole reading with my Vedic astrologer after she was born. And
Oh,
oh,
cool.
wow. So she's a Libra. And so she really carries this like balance and kindness and softness and being able to work with people and understand them. But then the strongest house in her chart is it's actually has Saturn and Mars there. Mars is exalted and Saturn is in its own house, Capricorn. Um,
Oh.
and it also sits with Venus, which is something called Digbala, which makes it very strong. And so that combination of them all together, it's like there's a dedication. And the way Richard described it was like, this is a chart of someone who's actually tangibly going to be able to make change. Like there's something about the follow through of like being, very dharmic and being able to see her actions really come into fruition in this life. So I feel she carries that ambitious and will, and also like a sweetness to her as well.
Bless her.
Yeah.
And bless both of you for being, I just really so present to what type of consciousness these children require, right? What type of devotion, what type of reality they're requiring to enter the planet right now, and just blessing both of you for your individual paths and for the path of conscious relating that you've walked, that you consciously wove together a field in which a beautiful awakened being could enter, and serve this planet in a deep way.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, thank you for listening to the story and being like a medicine keeper, like a witness and someone who holds space for these transformational journeys. Kind of just thought of you right away. If I was like, if there's anyone I could tell this to and record it.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I feel like truly just incredibly honored to get to receive it. I know it's a very precious gift, a jewel of like the real birth story. And I mean, I'm transformed by it. So thank you. I really feel honored.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'd love to close with a prayer. If we're ready, we can just tune back in. Just gratitude for all the people, all the women that have walked this path before, all the mothers and the fathers who so much is asked of them and they show up. So just feeling the gratitude, feeling for my gratitude for my parents, for all the parents that came before in our lineage and that are doing the work right now to show up for their children and be on a path of healing and showing up for what these children are asking of us. And also, gratitude for all the people who also don't take the path of having children and how they are so needed as well, and how they are able to help and show up for the mamas and the fathers and all the beings that are coming in at this time. And this blessing, sending blessing energy to all. Thanking all these souls that are coming in at this time. As hard as it is to be human, thank you for showing up. Blessed be. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. If you liked it, share it with a friend or leave us a review on iTunes. You can also follow along on Instagram at Meredith and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com to be sure to receive all the new and inspiring content. Thanks again for being here. It's an honor to walk this path with you.